This is Insider Interviews with Epok Advice, where we sit down with some of the industry's leaders and hear about their vision for the future. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend Ali Spinner, a partner at Crowe Soberman's tax group and a leader in the high net worth, ultra high net worth family office tax space. Her expertise spans domestic, international tax planning, complex estate, tax and trust structures, post-mortem planning, corporate reorganization. It goes on and on, Ali. She also advises on business transactions and, is really recognized across industry for her genuine passion in building meaningful, multi-generational relationships with her clients. I had the benefit of hanging out with Ali in Bahamas recently at an event, and we had such rich conversations about the future of high net worth, ultra high net worth wealth management in Canada. I'm just so excited to share that conversation and the continuation of that conversation with everyone today. So, Ali, we're excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too. I know from that introduction, I sound like the world's most exciting accountant, right? At least I think so in my mind.
So in the spirit of letting you describe yourself, how would you describe your expertise and your background?
Sure. Okay. Great question. At my core, I am a technical accounting nerd, and I love it. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. But even though I live in the world of technical tax planning, estate planning, my favorite thing to do is to take that technical mumbo jumbo and deliver it to my clients and to my clients' advisors in a way that is understandable, really, so that my clients can take that education of a technically complex topic and use it to make a decision, whether it's a wealth management decision, a family decision, whatever it might be, but they can use it to make a decision and understand what the outcomes will be from a tax point of view.
And when you think about that work, and you think about the high net worth, ultra high net worth space in Canada, you and I had been talking about like where the thresholds are, how we look at the
Mhm.
market today.
Yep.
And one of the things you shared with me is sort of what happens above that sort of $20 million zone and above, and before people can justify having their own family office, but when their needs become much more complex. Share with me a
Mhm.
little bit how you
Sure.
think about your client base and how much you spend time with each different segment of the market.
This is a little bit of the world according to Ali, but
Yeah.
this is how I approach it, and I do see similarities in different market segments, if you will. So I would say in that when people have wealth, let's say between from 20 to maybe 250 million dollars, they generally don't have and don't necessarily need a ton of infrastructure around them, or I should say, a ton of dedicated infrastructure around them. Meaning that they don't need. Again, this is my opinion only. This doesn't. Different people can feel differently about themselves, but from my perspective, and again, I'm not here to give wealth management advice. I'm coming from the tax accountant and tax advisory lens. But they need advice. They need great advice, but they don't need full-time people. They don't necessarily need full-time bookkeepers. They don't need a full-time family office team. Of course, that could mean a whole bunch of different things. They don't need a CIO, a person who's only working for them making investment decisions. What I find in that space, is they still work with advisors. They still work with whether it's a multifamily office, whether it's more of a traditional type broker or an ultra high net worth group at one of the different financial institutions. They generally seem to have one advisor, can be from a various types of firms, but one advisor who acts as the quarterback on the wealth management side and has insight into all the different pieces, even if not all of their wealth is managed by the same group. They tend to have one person on the wealth management side who oversees and who can report on it as a whole. And there's a lot of people in Canada in that 20 to $250 million range. It actually, sometimes it surprises me, but maybe it shouldn't. It surprises me how every day I'm talking to new families that fit in that space. I think there's a lot of quiet wealth. where who needs advice and who needs guidance. Above that, let's say at about $250 million plus, that's when I do start to see that the clients that I work with have more dedicated infrastructure.
And when you think about those wealthy families, what are the hot topics from a tax perspective that they're coming to you for? What are the patterns that you're seeing
Yep.
emerge around tax?
Sure. So, I mean, the first, in order to answer that question, I first have to think about what type of wealthy person or ultra high net worth person or family am I dealing with? Is it a founder who's had a liquidity event? Is it a founder who hasn't yet had a liquidity event but has taken some money off the table? Is it a family who's inherited money? Have they inherited money, or is there a trust that's going to be giving them money over time? Are they lottery winners? I seem to have also a lot of exceptionally wealthy lottery winners in my group as well. So even within all of those different groups, there's different subsets. What I would say though, which is very important, and I actually think that I can this covers all of those different groups. Right now in Canada, it's not a time where people are being overly aggressive. The tax landscape has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, such that there's all sorts of mandatory reporting and other items that we have to contend with, where a lot of the aggressive planning and the planning that was just too cute has gone by the wayside, which is okay in my world and the kind of world that I work in. Right now, I see there's a few different themes that I see. Number one is making sure that you can find an accounting and tax team who can efficiently and practically have your compliance done. I often say that the tax rules in Canada actually aren't that difficult, but complying with them is difficult. But so number one is just making sure that work is getting done efficiently. Number two is making sure that global investments are structured efficiently, making sure that if we're investing into the US or Europe or the Middle East, making sure that our investments, if we're Canadians sitting on top of those investments, making sure that we're able to repatriate the money back to Canada without
Yeah.
double and triple taxation. That's important. Another really important item also is making tax efficient philanthropy. I find that many of my clients in this space are exceptionally philanthropic and give away lots of money, which is absolutely wonderful. They support many of Canada's different philanthropic charities, I should say, and where we can help and where accountants can help is really making sure that our clients are giving away that money in a tax efficient way. One other item that's not quite tax driven, it is, but it's not quite tax driven, is also the passing of money down generations.
And that's emotional, right? Like that's less about the code and more about patterns that you've seen over your career
Yeah,
that have worked, right?
yeah,
One of the things that strikes me as you're talking is just the diversity of themes that you're working with clients on.
yeah,
How did you get into this, or how did this become your passion? You describe
yeah,
yourself like a nerd. I'm a nerd for the industry too. I think that's why
yeah,
we're drawn to each other.
yeah.
But I would really love to hear your personal story of why this is something you're passionate about. And
Sure. Well, I'll give a quick recap of a long story. Didn't think I was going to be an accountant. I thought I was going to be a doctor. My father was a physician, and I figured, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. Realized I can't stand this stuff, science. It wasn't didn't have a knack for it. Decided to become an accountant, and I remember very way back from the first co-op job that I had. Someone's like, "Oh, tax is hard." I'm like, "I'll try that. Tax is hard. Why not do the hard stuff?" I fell into it, and when I started my career, I was dealing in the world of tax, but dealing with enormous, large multinational financial institutions, public companies, and working with a tax group of 20, 30 people at a public corporation as a professional accountant. It wasn't so exciting. I wanted to be able to sit across the table and talk to clients one to one, look in the eyes of the person who was actually going to have to make a decision or this was going to affect them. And I kind of went all in, and I've been working in this what I'll call private company services, high net worth space in one capacity or another for probably over 20 years now. So I don't know, it's a puzzle, it's fun, it's unique, it's exciting. I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, when you talk about some of these major events, whether it's the selling of a business or the passing on of of wealth to the next generation, like those are really big events in people's
Yeah.
lives, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, it really, really matters to the end
And
family.
the other thing as well is that having the opportunity to be that trusted advisor and that trusted person who's able to, the client has to bear all, and I have to understand exactly what's going on, what all the numbers are, what it all means, but also be able to, have a front seat at the table to ask the questions and hear the answers. It's very rewarding from my point of view. I love it. I think I love to serve, and I'm glad to do it.
And in that capacity, you have a front row seat on how advisors and large firms and small firms and different investment management strategies and the people that represent all
Mm-hmm.
those are showing up. Without naming names or picking
Yeah.
favorites, tell me what the best are doing. If you think about that 20 million plus invested
Mm-hmm.
sweet spot of ultra high net worth, not the family office teams per se, but those
Yeah.
who are trying to do it within a firm structure. What are the best financial advisory and investment advisory firms doing that make your life easier, but also really show you that they're ahead of sort of the pack as it relates to
Mm-hmm.
serving those families? And what would your advice to them be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of different nuances to, I think, the way that I'm going to answer it there. Um, Number one, I think in this world of advising clients, it's making clients feel well taken care of. And I know it sounds so simple, but some of the best absolutely make their clients feel well taken care of, and that it comes from a place of authenticity. It's not just about showing up at a quarterly meeting and running through the numbers.
Yeah.
It's coming from a place where it's authentic, it's real, it's showing a side of yourself, connecting with your clients, really getting to know them. That is wonderful, and I think that is very important. Of course, there's returns and making sure that you're meeting the client's goals and objectives from that perspective. But that's table stakes. I think is easy to expect of all advisors, especially in the wealth management space. Um, I was also going to say plays well in the sandbox with others.
Yeah.
For sure, I see all kinds, and we come at it from an approach of we are part of a team. We are providing, we're part of a holistic team that is providing advice to a client with other members of the client's advisory team, and realizing that sometimes it's each advisor's turn to drive the bus, and sometimes it's time to take a step back and let someone else drive the bus. And it's important to not step on each other's toes, but work together for the common good of the client. So just realizing that the easier we can make our lives back and forth, the better it can be.
Yeah, and making sure that where you have a process that is an input or an output, that there's
Yeah.
just, good collaboration around it. I think
Yeah.
increasingly, working with some of these firms on their ultra high net worth strategy, third party collaboration is a
Mm-hmm.
big part of those strategies. And another big part is what they're calling tax optimizations. They want to find
Yeah.
better ways to partner with you.
That's an important idea, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure from the financial institution wealth management side where the line is. I certainly know from my perspective, I am not here to give any wealth management advice. I have no insurance to do so, and I'm not interested. I appreciate what I hear very often is on, and this has to do with regulation and whether, who can give tax advice. As there's many in-house accountants and lawyers who are tax professionals at wealth management shops, and I hear over and over that they can help big picture, they can help give ideas, but they can't execute. And that, I think, is regulatory, and I don't exactly know where the line is, but many groups have excellent teams of you know historically tax and estate planning accountants and lawyers who've grown up in the world of giving, of executing, and then move over to the side of giving that holistic advice. And many of them are excellent and come up with wonderful ideas. Well, I welcome it. I think it's great. And sometimes it does take the client through a bit of an education process that where it's great because then I don't have to charge for that education process.
Right.
Sometimes it's oversold, where you know, I recall times where it's a bit oversold where well they'll say, well, we'll bring the client to you and you'll just have to implement. And it's like, well, that's not how I work either. I still have to spend the time. And quite frankly, I'm not in a model where I'm just coming in to execute a transaction. I have long-term relationships with clients. The times of having the wealth planning teams expecting us to just, quickly execute and get it done, that more feels like 10 years ago plus. I find now it's getting into this better zone of working together.
Yeah.
Usually when I'm meeting with a client, they'll come to me and say, oh, my financial institution has done an estate plan for me. It's a huge document. I'm like, okay, no problem, send it across. And it's helpful for me because some of the analysis, whether it's the data organization, it's already there. I can piece it apart. And the truth is there's really only, I don't know, 5 things that I do or talk about, and it's a matter of tailoring them to the client. They're usually the same items in that document, but it's important that it's given them a flavor of the item. I find where I help is that I can explain it in a way that's even more curated to them
Right.
specifically.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you're working sometimes directly with the advisor and sometimes with those central wealth planning teams. A big
Hmm.
part of where we're seeing technology or even intelligence spend around AI is really around
Hmm.
pattern spotting and understanding
Yeah.
the triggers for those conversations. So it sounds like you have those 4 or 5 things that you always are likely to get
Yeah.
pulled in on, and as you think through your triggers, they're life event triggers probably, and they're probably also, specific concerns from the client. Like, how would you describe
Hmm.
that the way in which someone pops up with a more complex need?
Yeah. Yeah. So usually what'll happen is that when I'm meeting with a new, I guess there's a couple of ways, but if I'm meeting with a new client, I like to get to know them. I'll start asking questions. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your wealth. What type of assets do you own? And it'll help guide the discussion of, are we talking about tax on death? Are we talking about what I call the big tax being the income tax on gains? Are we talking about the little tax being the probate fee depending on the province in which the person lives? Are we talking about US estate tax? Is the person a US citizen? Do they have US assets? All those different pieces weave into it. I probe a lot because I see that as part of my job. I'm a very much a planful accountant as opposed to being reactionary. I will talk to them about their philanthropic intent. I always
Yeah.
say it's okay to say I'm not philanthropic. Like, I don't want people to be shy about telling the truth. But if they are going to be philanthropic, I need to know because I have a lot of value to provide
Right.
as part of that discussion. So I do ask a lot of probing questions at the beginning of a relationship. I also will say to clients, it takes me about a year to get into someone's head. And as funny as it sounds, when I'm doing I still love doing people's personal tax returns and reviewing them before they go out the door, because that's when I get into people's heads and I can see where they're making silly mistakes. And what I mean by silly mistakes is, are they income splitting with their family members in a way that they should be? Are they making donations in the way that they should be? Are they holding investments in a way that is not as optimized as they should hold those investments? So that might pop into my head from that point of view. Through the relationship, I like to guide people on, these are the times when you should call me. And then also I work in a world where the ground is always shifting. There's new rules coming out every day. There's new budgets,
Right.
new tax rules presented. I'm always running through my lists in my mind or on my screen
Yeah.
of who do I need to be talking to, who do I need to get a hold of and warn them that this is coming and we have to make this change, that change. So it really is when you step into that role as that trusted advisor. It's only when the clients do trust you and know that there's value in the advice that you give, that there's that two-way discussion that's just kind of always going on, even if there might be some pauses and when there's any change in the facts.
Right. And what scares you? Like, we obviously have a spectrum of tax optimization
Yeah.
strategies.
Yeah.
Obviously, no tax advice probably is scary, and the wrong tax advice can be
Yeah.
scary, or more aggressive might be scary. How do you think about the no-go zones or the things that you feel like you're seeing more of now that maybe you
Yeah,
wouldn't feel as comfortable
yeah.
with?
A couple, a few things scare me. Number one, right now in Canada, as I mentioned, it's less of a time of doing weird, aggressive stuff. What
Right,
scares me is if your number comes up at the Canada Revenue Agency and you have to go through an audit. Um, Unfortunately, I try not to speak ill of anyone, and certainly not of the Canada Revenue Agency. I get it; they're a government organization; they have to carry out administering the Income Tax Act, but their budget has been cut dramatically. The level of service that we get from them is very, very low, unfortunately. And often what will happen is that when a client's number does come up and it's their turn to be looked at for this, that, or the other, the person who's reviewing it has no idea what they're talking about, and we're ending up with these huge bills to just see processes get through the CRA, which is not right. It's not good for Canadians, and
right.
it's certainly not how I want to make my money or want clients to have to spend money. That scares me. um, some things that people do with life insurance scare me.
I
I'm
know
not
you and I have
anti
talked about that before.
I'm not anti
That's
life
a hot
insurance.
topic.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so without giving any specifics,
yeah,
that is a hot topic. So when
yeah,
you think about the role of life insurance for
yeah.
wealthy, specifically entrepreneurs or people who own their own
Hmm.
businesses,
Hmm. Hmm.
family businesses, but broadly for wealthy Canadians, what are your thoughts on
Yeah,
what makes it scary versus part of a
sure,
great
sure.
strategy?
So if there is a need for life insurance, 100% it makes sense. Whether it's for a buy sell in a shareholders agreement, whether it's because there's a liquidity issue that if somebody passes away, there's going to be a huge tax event and we need to have insurance. Whether if you have someone who has a young family and they need to look after their family, to put kids through school, things like that, all the typical traditional uses for life insurance all still make sense. I think that it's great. I completely understand people who like to use insurance as an asset class and like it
Right.
because it can be a very tax efficient vehicle to hold investments in. I totally get it. I totally understand. Where I get nervous is when people who otherwise never have used leverage in their lives are being encouraged to use leverage for purposes of life insurance, and
Right.
often yeah, the math works. I'm using air quotes, like the math works, but often, as I'll say to a client, if they're asking me like, hey, what do you think about this, I'm like, well, if you liked leverage in your life, you could have margined your investment account and borrowed to grow your investment account that way, but you never did it. Why didn't you do that? Oh, well, I don't like leverage. Okay, well, why is someone forcing leverage down your throat for purposes of a life insurance
Right.
for purposes of a life insurance policy? Again, in certain circumstances, absolutely can make sense, but in many
Right.
cases, it makes me nervous. And one other piece is that I find, and I'm sure I'm not making lots of friends in the life insurance space saying this, but it is what it is. Often where life insurance will be used is if someone's on what I call the never never plan, meaning that they have enough money that they're never going to use this money in their lifetime. The money is
Right.
absolutely going to go to the next generation. And sure, if that money is invested into a life insurance product, it's possible that it could be transferred to the next generation in a magnified tax efficient way. Now, maybe you'd get the same returns on an after tax basis by investing in other items, but what I think that people perhaps don't explain enough to the people buying the insurance is, well, if you're going to take $15 million or 20, whatever the number is, and stick it into this insurance product, because I'm not somebody who likes people to have to then borrow against the life insurance to access the
Yes.
cash surrender, all that type of stuff. That means that you're not that money's going to go to the next generation on death, right? In its purest form, as opposed to someone saying like, okay, I'm 80 years old, I can start. I'm making things up, but I can start making
Yeah.
distributions to my children of cash in my lifetime, so the kids need it now. So depending on how wealthy someone is and how large the life insurance is as part of their investment portfolio, we do have to realize that you're locking up money into something that really the intention is that it'll get passed to the next generation on your death, and you might decide as time goes on that you want to give it to them earlier.
So let's talk about wealth transfer because that's one of the hottest topics in the industry. You have a front row seat on not only people planning, but I'm sure a number of your clients actually executing wealth transfer
Absolutely.
events.
Yeah.
What are some of the sort of patterns you're seeing
Yeah.
as it relates to women, as it relates to the next generation?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that no one seems to have it figured out because I hear frustrations from literally just about every subset of group who tries it this way or tries it that
Yeah.
way. I'm speaking in broad strokes, but often people, I shouldn't have done it like this. I should have done it like that. Fine. What I think is really critical is making sure that people have education, making sure that people have education, have a career of some type, feel that they have the ability to give back to society, and but that career could be philanthropic as well. It doesn't have to be the making of money. It could be raising children. It could be all sorts of different things, community work. But making sure that people have a reason, that our children have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, if you will.
Right.
And I see in the patterns, some people, not some people, many people have given the 20-year-olds, okay, we're turning on the tap, and here's your company with $10 million in it. You'll get another 10 million in 2 years, and another 10 million after that. And then some of the children, quote unquote, spend it wisely. Again, of course, spending it wisely according to the parents' terms, if you will.
Yes.
But that goes to the question of how much to give, how early to give, when to give. I think what is really important, and what I discuss a lot with my clients, is transparency. It doesn't mean that you have to tell the next generation everything or how much and when and all that stuff, but I do think it's important to have an element of transparency, in one's world, and have give an opportunity to the children to educate themselves. There's nothing worse than when this happens all the time, where someone, they say, oh, our children have absolutely no idea how much money we have. We've never told them. We've lived a very typical life, if you will, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, about living a
No.
typical life, but they've not let on at all to how much money they have. And then sometimes the children can be in their 50s or 60s. They have no idea how to be stewards of wealth, and how to have meetings with professionals, and how to seek out advice and trust people and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I say I see it at every angle. I still believe in, when people talk to me about it, I always encourage transparency. I think it depends on the nature of who it is, and who's there, and what the goals and objectives of the family are.
Right. Um, yeah, it's so emotional too, and
Hugely
there's so
emotional.
much interpersonal dynamic involved, and there's so much unsettlement or feeling unsettled involved, and then there's also um, the parental child dynamic, the sibling dynamic. Like there's so many dynamics. So
The
you've
husband
definitely got
wife
a front
dynamic,
row
yeah, or
seat.
the spousal dynamic. Absolutely, it is fascinating. Realizing that no accountant, no lawyer, no wealth manager can create a structure that makes our problems go away, or that can have the difficult conversations for us.
Speaking of difficult conversations, one of the things you and I talked about is how few people really understand the costs of their lifestyle or cash flow needs. You use the example of one of your lottery clients wanting
Yeah.
to go off and buy expensive homes. How often do you find you're having to help people press pause on big purchases